What a game. Hugely consequential, but I'm just going to ask you what it was like to be in there for that.
I mean, Brian, it reminded me of those Heat games we were going to 10 years ago. It reminded me of those Heat games we were going to like 15, 20 years ago. It was absolutely electric in there. And I really thought when the Bucks came out in the fourth quarter and nailed that three-pointer, it was over. In fact, I was sitting next to the legend Tom Joyner, who I'm doing an Anscape story on.
Name drop.
And also Jamal Mashburn and his wife. And I was like, game's over after that three-pointer. And Jamal Mashburn's wife turned to me and goes, if you're going to be negative, then you need to leave. Like, I was like, all right, my bad. But them dudes came back. I mean, even with 6 minutes left, what were they? They were down a hefty portion. But, you know, Martin was great. Like, people talked about Jimmy in that fourth quarter. I thought Martin was amazing too. And it was just like the Bucks just looked so dominant, and then all of a sudden they just like ran out of juice, ran out of gas, and Jimmy just was like, I thought that performance I saw from him in the bubble would be the best Jimmy performance that I would ever see. When he just like ran out of gas at the end, that famous photo. But this topped that. I mean, to have the greatest Heat performance record ever in the playoffs, that's saying a lot. That's one of the greatest playoff performances ever. And to have that seat and to hear that crowd and emotion, and man, it was as special. It's probably the most special individual performance that I've seen covering this league for, 24 years. And that's saying a lot. I've seen a lot of special nights, but if he doesn't put the team on his back, they don't win. And that's what he did.
So we talked about this a little bit before we came on here about what else is up there from what you've seen. I think you and I might previously have had the same number one, but yeah. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, no, the number one greatest playoff performance I ever saw, it just always comes to my mind when I think about it, Brian. We were both at the game, May 18th, 2008. Game 7 between the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Boston Celtics, who would end up being champions. And they had that. It reminded me of that Dominique versus Bird duel, but this time it was LeBron and Paul Pierce. And LeBron put 45, game high 45. It was incredible. I wonder, I don't know if that was a game where he dunked on KG.
But, no, that was in Cleveland, that game.
Yeah.
No, that was Kevin Harlan's no regard for human life.
Yeah.
That was that dunk, yeah.
But that to me was LeBron at his best, and he's still doing amazing things. But that to me was when he was probably the most intimidating as a player. Was in that series. He had 45. Paul Pierce dropped 41 in a 97-92 barn burn.
I know.
Like they didn't even reach 100 points. But the intensity of that game is the amazing duel between those guys. And I mean, LeBron couldn't get over the finish line, but I just remember how just Boston was just so good defensively, and he was just so ferocious in that game. And until Jimmy Butler's night, that would have been my number one.
Well, 2 games in that building. One was that game. Actually, 3 games in that building. 3 games in the TD Garden would rank in my top 3 that I've seen in person. One was that game. And by the way, don't hold me this exact, but I want to say about 2 minutes left. Celtics by 2. Cavs had the ball. LeBron took a 3 from the left wing. And back then we sat on the baseline right next to the Celtics bench, if you remember.
Great seat.
So the ball, it was right in front of us, and I was watching the ball come. I had a perfect angle on it, and I swear I thought it was in to put the Cavs up 1, and it just hit the side of the rim. So he almost scored even more. Then game 6, 2012, Heater down 3-2. LeBron in that building scores 17 in the first quarter or something like that. Yeah. And on his way to the 46 points, I think it was. A vitally important game in his career because he hadn't won yet. Yeah. And if they lost that game, which was on the road, in a place where he had not been able to avoid elimination several times. He'd played several eliminations in games in Boston against that team and lost. If he had lost that game, then he's out for 2 years in a row in Miami. This has been discussed ad nauseum, but Chris Bosh probably gets traded, etc. Instead, he wins, and then the Heat win Game 7, and then we take the Cup Finals in 5. And then last year, and I'll put this right up there, Jimmy Butler, Game 6, Eastern Conference Finals. I believe he had 46.
Yeah.
On a bad knee. Like, he got hurt like in Game 2 of that series, and like games 3, 4, 5, he could barely move. Like, he was dragging that leg up. We thought it was over. The effort that he put forth in that game was unbelievable. Like, that was jaw-dropping. I don't remember all of his stats, but he made a bunch of defensive plays. To me, I remember writing that night, there's a hallway, Championship Alley, that runs from the Heat, when the Heat come off the court, from the Heat bench all the way back to their locker room. And there's life-size, wall-size photos of these great moments in Heat history. There's a photo of LeBron that night in 2012. There's a photo of Udonis Haslem bleeding, in a playoff game. And I remember saying they got to make room on that wall for Jimmy Butler for this game, because that was that much of a performance. And so now that was a game that I witnessed. These are games I witnessed in person. Yeah. This one I didn't, obviously. I was here in Phoenix. Yeah. I gotta say that it was funny. Spears, right after I left my hotel room, I watched the game in my hotel room, both games last night, and then the Lakers Grizzlies game. And as I was leaving my hotel room, I was going out to meet up with somebody because it wasn't that late here. And I ran into the referees. The referees for tonight's game had just watched those 2 games and were just like so jacked up about, I don't think I'm talking out of school. They were just really jacked up about how great the games were. Yeah. So that was kind of cool. Like, we were on the off night and everybody was watching it.
Let me add this too.
Yeah.
The moment that stood out to me last night was, what's that video game where they're like, he's on fire? You know what I mean?
NBA Jam.
Yeah. It was like Jimmy was in like NBA Jam, man. And he's torching Drew Holiday. Like, how good a defender Drew Holiday is?
It's the best.
He's screaming, he can't guard me. He can't guard me. I'm like, damn.
He can guard you, but just not right now.
Yeah. Like, for him to be on fire like that, where like Drew couldn't even say nothing. Drew just
right.
It was like an N1 play. He just, hey man.
So Bobby, the thing about Mike Budenholzer is that he has been known in the past to be resistant to changing his defensive strategy. Sort of famously, when he had that 60-win Hawks team when he was coaching in Atlanta, they played the Cavs in the conference finals, and the Cavs set every record in the book for 3-point shooting, and he refused to change his defense. And that happened last night again. The Heat have shot in these first 4 games. There's some historic numbers about how good they're shooting from 3-point range. So when you're double teaming Jimmy Butler, you are running a risk. But at some point, it's kind of like, that game in San Francisco a couple nights ago, Draymond Green was like, look, we are not letting De'Aaron Fox beat us on that elbow jumper. So if Harrison Barnes or somebody else is going to hit it, he was going to hit it, but we are not letting Fox do it. And I respected Draymond for saying that. And I'm just kind of surprised that they didn't make someone else do it, Bobby, because Jimmy was awesome, but the Bucks were kind of bleeped around and found out, to use the parlance of our times.
Well, yeah, he was. They're the Milwaukee for a team that's won a championship and basically has the same parts out there. Their offense went out the window, right? It was like a team who had basically the Butler play and the crowd basically threw them off kilter here, and they didn't adjust. I think they didn't get the ball out of Jimmy's hands. You could have made the argument, do you put Giannis on him, right? Do you make that argument there? I didn't like Giannis bringing the ball up at the end like that. To me, I would have been comfortable with Drew Holiday doing it. So it's funny for a Heat team that was basically 8 minutes away from being eliminated in a playing game against Chicago, and was one of the poor 3-point shooting teams this league, although they had a good month of March. What they were able to do, in these wins against Milwaukee, whether it been, basically they've dusted Duncan Robinson off. What they've got, certainly Butler, Lowry, Caleb Martin. I mean, it's incredible to be in a position here. And I would say this, I was in Brooklyn in 2013 when we went down 3-1 to Chicago. And I was talking with Mark and we were talking about like the greatest performances. And that game 4 was a Nate Robinson game when he went off and we lost in triple overtime.
Yes.
And when people say, well, can teams come back from 3-1? Yes, they can. I mean, we came back and evened the series. We stole game 6 in Chicago and came home for game 7. But the problem is we had exerted so much energy to come back from 3-1 that there was nothing left in the tank. So can Milwaukee come back? Yes, they can. But man, they're going to have to. Miami's not going into Milwaukee laying down. Like, if there's a chance to eliminate them in Milwaukee and not rely on coming at home, they're going to do it.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN Plus right now.